and welcome. This is Lisa Jones, and you are listening to the Exploring Death podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Exploring Death podcast. I'm Lisa Jones, your host, and today I have with me William Peters. William is a family therapist and founder of the Shared Crossing Project. He directs its research initiative that studies extraordinary end-of-life experiences. William conducts workshops and presents nationally on his research. His 2 near-death experiences and various shared death experiences inform his work in conscious end-of-life preparation. Welcome, William.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Well, yeah, I am so excited. I was just looking through my notes, and we actually had you booked a year ago to be on. And, you know, your whole study of shared death experiences and end-of-life phenomenon has just kept expanding and expanding. And you've literally didn't have time to do this interview until just now. So I'm thrilled to catch you at this moment. And I know you have some exciting news to share.
Oh, I know what you're on. Yeah. Thanks. So we have signed a contract with Simon & Schuster to write a book for a popular audience, large audience, and it will be to make our research findings about the shared death experience available to the world, essentially. And we feel great that Simon & Schuster sees the need for this, because as they said to us, there's a lot of information about end of life, a lot of great people doing great things, but a lot of it is kind of the same and lacking the real positive, optimistic perspective on death and dying that our research reveals through the study of the shared death experiences.
Wow. And that's what I just love about your research, is that it really helped me come to terms with what I experienced, which was my shared death experience the night that my husband died. And I didn't even know that there was a grouping, or I guess I had heard the name shared death experience, but when I met you at an IANS conference, I think it was 2 years ago, you explained to me that you'd been doing this research and you've interviewed how many people about shared death experiences?
Well, we've interviewed well over 200, and then in terms of the accounts that we have over 200 real solid accounts. And for research of this nature, when you're talking about in-depth interviews with each of our research candidates, and then assessing and analyzing each of these cases for the phenomena, for the benefits, all of that takes a great deal of time. And it's at this point, we have satisfied the scholarly criterion for a robust study. Certainly we have more questions now than we have before, but we've really addressed a lot of our primary questions, the main one being, do these exist? And they do exist, and we don't know how common they are, but we suspect that because of the ease in which we were able to collect these over 200 accounts, we suspect they're far more ubiquitous than previously thought. Because I can tell you, when we present our research to other researchers at conferences and what have you, their question is always, well, how did you find this many people? We have, we've heard about these experiences, but they're rather disparate in a certain way, and it's hard to get a large collection that would satisfy the requirements of a research study. And I'm mystified by that, because I started my research 8 years ago, and I have never had trouble finding them. If I give a talk at a conference, I normally have at least a dozen people coming up to me saying, I had this, I never knew it was a something, I can't believe you're talking about it, and I'd love to share my story. Yeah. Similar to you, actually.
Yeah, that's exactly how we met. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to talk to you. And I shared a few details. And then you're like, oh my goodness, we need to, have a conversation. And because I've had multiple, not only with my husband, but then with my dad and my mom, and also corroboration with my brother, who had a similar experience the night that my mom died. So it is just so fascinating to me how this information is, that you're putting it together and sharing it with people, because I think when people start really learning about it, I'm going to be shocked if there isn't a tidal wave of people calling your office and saying, this happened to me too. I just think it's not known,
Yeah, it's interesting how people find us. The tidal wave would be good for the field, maybe not so good for our little shared crossing project. But it's interesting because just today we received an email from a woman from Sweden, and she shared an experience when her mother died, and it was just what we call a full-blown shared death experience. She was near her mother when she died, and she felt like she was pulled into the space where her mother was during her transition. And she saw, the room, everything changed shape, and the light was like she'd never seen before. And her mother assured her that everything was okay and that she was dying and that she loved her and that she'd see her again. And there were other family members that appeared that she recognized. And this person said that, oh, I just knew my mother was transitioning, dying, but yet she really wasn't dying. She was just going to another dimension, and she found it incredibly affirming. And I think one of the things we find when we do our research is that people, when they find us, they're very relieved to know that this is actually now a researched, known phenomena that occurs in healthy people. So the fears that so many people share, especially if they're in a medicalized setting, that they may be perceived as having some sort of, hallucination or, temporary mental illness of some type. No, our research and the research of others is now really validating these experiences. And in fact, we're finding that to the extent that you have more consciousness and openness to death and dying, and a mindfulness practice on top of that, we find that these are facilitators of these experiences. And that's been a really pleasant finding for those of us who value our spiritual practices, if you will, to know that in addition to helping us in our lives every day, they can really help us at this most difficult moment to, in some ways, as we see reported all the time. I felt like I went into the initial stages of the afterlife with my departing loved one. And it was, beyond anything I'd ever imagined possible.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's amazing. And I feel like for me, I'm also a hospice volunteer, which I know that you've done that work as well. And sitting with my patients, especially the ones that are in vigil, which, means that they're pretty much 24 to 48 hours, they're showing all the signs of death. And I've had multiple experiences of the light changing in the room. I mean, I literally had to blink my eyes a few times. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's emerald green in here right now. What is happening? Of course, I mean, I know what's happening, but it's just still shocking when it does happen.
You actually are what we would consider an adept. In other words, you're able to have these experiences more easily than the average bear. We don't know why that is, but we do know that people who have near-death experiences and people that have extraordinary spiritual experiences of a variety of types tend to be able to have these. That's one of the factors. It's not exclusive for sure, but when I say that you're an adept, it seems like now that you've been birthed into this capacity of having an SDE, you can now seem to have the capacity to have them more easily and frequently than other people. And this is a whole, other area of discussion about like, well, what's actually happening that allows you to have these experiences? Now, I'm similar to you, and I had 2 near-death experiences that you alluded to in the introduction, and then now over a dozen shared death experiences, both at bedside and remote, like not at bedside when people are dying. So what is it about us that can have these? And I think this is going to be an ongoing, another level of research, which is fascinating, because to the extent that we can learn more about these experiences and why people have them is the extent to which we can actually train people to have these if they want to. And we know that there's such positive experiences for the caregiver loved ones that people will naturally want to have them. And we do that training already at the Shared Crossing Project, and find that we have a good deal of success of training people to have them. But once again, we're not exactly sure what it is in our training that is enabling these people to have these experiences. So.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I'd like to talk about recently Ram Dass passed away. And wow, again, I had this just tremendous experience where I had taken a nap on Sunday, the 22nd of December, which is the day he passed. And I knew that he was nearing the end, but I didn't know when or anything. Last time I'd seen him was on stage at the Mac Theater here in Maui. Krishna Das was here doing a kirtan. And so they wheeled Ram Dass out, and he looked very just like, oh my gosh, is he even alive? He was very slumped over and not animated whatsoever. And I think there was almost an audible gasp from the 900 people sitting there, because, he really looked at the very end. But then it was just so sweet, because as they wheeled him out, he lifted his head and did a little wave like this. And it just was like this moment of, I felt like he was saying goodbye to everybody. So then fast forward 20 days later, I had taken this nap, woke up, and it almost felt like, it was almost like a drive-by or something. I just felt his energy come in from my right side, and it was almost like it just bounced right into me and then swerved off. And I was like, whoa, Ram Dass, what is going on? And I thought, I wonder when I'll see him again, or I just definitely thought of him at that moment. And then it was 2 hours later, I got the text that he had actually died right at that time of this experience. And I've got my whole body is chilling right now as I share this. So it's.
Yeah. So that experience that you had, so I should say something, that previous research on the shared death experience was done by Raymond Moody, and he tracked what we call bedside shared death experiences. So that means, a caregiver loved one at the bedside of someone dying, and they have this experience where they feel like they shared in this transition. And the words we hear is, I felt like I saw the initial stages of the afterlife with my departing loved one. So we have found in our research that there are even more remote, non-bedside experiences. Well, our data is cracking up to be, at least at this stage, about 60% are remote. And then of that 60%, there's a percentage, we probably have like a 20 of these that is just what you described. We call it a flyby.
That feels exactly like what it was, a flyby.
And that's what we call it. It's as if the person transitioning is coming by to let you know that they're leaving and that they're dying. And the feelings that the person have are very energetic. They seem to get your attention. The fact that you were sleeping actually makes you more available, because we found that sleep states or meditation states or states of trance that can even be driving really avail ourselves to these experiences. So your sleep state, your nap was, quite fortuitous. Not to say that if you were awake, you wouldn't have had an experience, because we have a lot of those as well. But So this experience typically, your interpretation, if it fits with the others that we've had in our research, would be something like, I felt, him go by. It was energetic. It was an acknowledgement that he was going. I got it. And it was almost like a thank you, I love you, goodbye,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll see each other again. Something like that. Now,
Yep.
there's a lot of information in there, but people somehow, without any verbal communication, have a knowing that that is the message.
Wow. It just blows me away. Again, I love to hear that there's other corroborating evidence because once again, as a former certified public accountant, like I tend to be very skeptical and I'm always like, really, did this really happen? Or, I'm always like, that was weird, but I'd like to take that vocabulary out of my mind and my talking about it and just saying how amazing, how wonderful, how extraordinary that these wonderful things happen. And so I love that you're doing the research to help give us all that credibility behind it rather than us feeling like we're insane or something, like it's just some weird thought or some weird feeling or experience.
Yeah, and I think I know when people share with us, especially the remote experiences, they'll say, well, yeah, I kind of had this sense, and they'll be downplaying it, and they'll also tell us more about it. And then they tell us that it was a rather big feeling. They knew it was the person who was dying. They had this sense of heart opening, a sense of appreciation, gratitude, love, and they knew everything was okay. They got a sense that this person was dying and that it was all okay. And so any sense of anxiety or fear was basically put at ease. So
Wow. Well, I'm curious too. I think this is covered in your research. With my mom, I had an overwhelming, I just gotten a call. She'd had a stroke earlier in the day. So I immediately packed my bag. She was in Hawaii. I was flying from Connecticut and I laid down because I just had a couple of hours. Again, I think I do well in the sleep state now that I'm thinking about it, because I also had mine with my husband and that's in a sleep state. So wow, just put that moment together. Anyway, when I was laying there, she came to me, just again, talk about tsunami. Her energy was just so bright and clear and loving and heart opening. And she said, you told me we'd be able to communicate when I went to the other side. And it was so vivid and just, oh my goodness. But she was not passed yet. I flew to Hawaii. I didn't even want to know. I'm like, if she died, I don't want to know. I just want to be there and then I'll figure out what's next. But I walked into the room and she sat up, looked at me in the eyes and lay down. And that was the last, experience she had of being awake. She was then basically in a coma for the next 2 or 3 days and then died once we decided we were going to put her in hospice. It's like she made the immediate decision, like, okay, you guys are good with this, I'm out. But have you heard of that where they're still, alive for several days after this amazing connection?
yes. So we call this an early or delayed shared death experience, which means that somebody, a caregiver or loved one, family member in your case, can have a shared death experience hours, days, typically not more than a week, but usually
Yeah, it was about 5 days. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's well within our research, what we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have all the phenomena of a full-blown shared death experience, but it's just not at that specific, medical time of death,
Mm-hmm.
cessation of brain functioning or cessation of breathing. So what we make of this, and this is also borne out by the great research of Dr. Peter Fenwick and his wife, Elizabeth Fenwick in Great Britain. They did a 5-year study on what they call them carers, but people that care for the dying. And they found that death, rather than being a moment in time, is a process that takes place over, hours, days sometimes. So if I were to hypothesize based on Dr. Fenwick's research and ours, your mother was probably going in and out of her body, whatever that aspect of consciousness is, soul, spirit, what have you. She was doing that. And in one of those states, she somehow reached out to you. And the word she gave to you was, you said this was possible. So, you know, we don't understand all that, but we have a number of cases that happen early that are very similar to yours. When they happen later, it's just a sense of they're fully out typically, and they're coming back to say, hey, you know, I'm okay. And, you know, and then they often will reveal to their, you know, remaining loved ones that they're with a greeting party of sorts. Maybe there's other family members that have already died that are there with them. And, you know, the experiencer will be able to see all this. So yes, the time space continuum is wider around these than just the moment of, you know, Western medicine, physical death.
Right. Oh my goodness, how fascinating. And the other thing in a part, or, you know, another part to this is that she also visited my brother at that same time, because I called him on the way to the airport saying, oh my God, mom came to visit me. And he said, she came to visit me too. And so that again was just this amazing, like the fact that she visited both of us and had very specific details of what she was sharing with each of us was just, wow.
So we call that a multiple person shared death experience. Those two occur. And we probably have 20 of those as well. And, you know, we know of a lot more. One of the drawbacks for collecting that type of data is that you have to have multiple family members willing to share that story. And oftentimes, families will have them at the bedside, and it'll be 2 or 3 or 4 people. And then maybe even some other family member remote will have one as well. Maybe not even at the same time, maybe, you know, a few hours later or something. But we know they happen. But like I said, one of the research challenges is getting everyone to okay sharing the experience, because if, you know, most families have people with different perspectives about these experiences, or in some cases they feel like their family's name or professional career could be endangered if you share one of these, you know, woo-wee stories. So you know, so like that, there's a downfall. There's kind of the drawback for our research really pointing these out. I am reasonably sure that they happen for families, you know, multiple members,
Much more frequently.
Much more frequently.
Well,
yeah.
I remember specifically when I was still in Connecticut and I was in the realm, my husband who passed away worked for General Electric, General Electric. And one of the top execs kind of cornered me one time at a party that we were at. And he said, you know, my dad came to visit me and I don't know what to do with this, you know? And again, it just was such an interesting moment, because I feel like this does happen to so many people, and people really don't know who to talk to, or especially if they've got a really high, you know, career situation going on where they don't want to be seen as crazy or weird or whatever. So it was interesting that he approached me.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. We hear that as well. In fact, it's so interesting. There's a banker in town who's really, you know, she does very well in town, and but she heard me talk one time, and she came up to me. She says, and she was all excited. She goes, you know, I had this when a family member was dying, and then a cousin had it. You know, she shared 3 or 4 people that had it at the same time, the death of this family member. And then I said, oh, I'd love to learn more about it. And then she got cold feet because, you know, even with confidentiality that we do give all our research participants, there's just that fear that there's be some ability to connect the story with the person. So anyway, it's natural. And we do hope that our research via this book in particular and the ongoing, you know, media that we do, like this interview right here, will really affirm people that these experiences happen. they're more common than we know, and that they happen in the healthy minds of people. So
That's right. Wow, that's great. Is there a particular story that just leaps forward that you'd like to share, or?
Gosh, there's so many of them. Particular story. Well, I'm particularly moved by one aspect of this, which is the greeting party. So here's one of our cases. So this woman was at the hospital when her father was dying, and he actually coded while he was in the hospital, and so she was removed from the room. So they sent her down the hall to the waiting area while the medical personnel worked on her father. Well, while she was in his waiting room of sorts, she went into this state where she and her father were walking down a beautiful country road. And then there was she looked at, as she was walking with her father, and there was a gate a beautiful gate. It was off to the right. And she heard these people talking. And as she heard them talking, she heard them saying this person's childhood name, saying that this person's childhood name was coming, that he was now coming. And she thought, that's really interesting. I had not heard this name for my father used in decades, but I know this is what his siblings and cousins called him when he was a child. And so she was walking towards the gate, and then all of a sudden she realized that she was not able to go to this party, but that her father was. And when they received him, she felt this real sense of he was home, he was with his beloved, deceased family and friends, and that he was okay. Everything was perfectly fine. And then she popped out of this state when the medical personnel the doctor came into the waiting room and said, ma'am, I need to tell you something. And she woke up and she says, I know, my father just died. And he said, yeah, how did you know? And she said, well, and she started to share this story about what she saw, and the doctor really wasn't able to make much of that, and walked out of the room. But she was very affirmed that she knew that he had a good death and transition, and was, as she said, home in his spirit home. So that's a case that always sits out. And one of the reasons it sits out in my mind was because in the early period of our research, this is one of the first, within the first 20 or so, I should say, we were wondering whether you could have this experience remotely, like whether you could be apart from the person. In this case, she's not in the same room. She doesn't even know he's dying. She knows his health is in peril, but doesn't know he's dying. And yet she has such a profound and affirming experience. So this one was an early case that was like, oh, wow, we were really onto something here. So
that is so beautiful. And what a gift for her to experience that. I mean, to me, that's what I feel like all of the experiences I've had with my loved ones, at the time of their death is just, it really woke me up to life to realize that, oh, wow, there is a continuation, and, it's not an ending. It's just a beginning for them, and, and a new beginning for life on earth without their physical body being here. But they're still here. I mean, my husband, who died 15 years ago, he's still here, and he told me he was going to help Clemson win the national football game last year. And I just kind of was like, okay, whatever. And then sure enough, they beat Alabama 44-16, which was hilarious. My husband was 44 when he died, and he died on 2/22, which again is times, 2 is 44. And they were not expected to win. So it was like a huge blowout. And I'm like, did he really do something? I mean, it just made me laugh. And again, Clemson's back in the national championship again this year. So who knows?
Yeah. Well, there are amazing synchronicities we find in our research as well. And people are quite drawn to these synchronicities. You just shared these numeric, either coincidences or synchronicities. I should say, my research team here, in particular, Dr. Michael Kinsella, were very hesitant to embrace these synchronicities because, it's looked at as pretty soft science, if you will. But I will tell you that we have been blown away by the frequency of these synchronicities, and we can say now, applying the scholarly methods, that these fall well beyond the typical matrices for coincidence or chance. They're like well beyond that. So we know something's happening here. Once again, we don't know how, but we do affirm people like yourself, if you're like saying, well, God, if I share this with most people, they think I'm a little crazy for thinking that, my husband could have anything to do with winning a Clemson game and all those numbers. But there could be something there. And I mean, we say that there seems to be something there.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I want to pull a few cards if you're okay with that. I do this in every interview, and just kind of see what comes up. I love it. Okay. So the first card is always the blockage card, and it's freedom. And what I'm getting about that is I feel like our whole society with death is, it's like we just feel like there is no freedom about it. It's like it's so secretive and like behind closed doors, and people don't want to talk about it. And there's just, it's like the furthest thing from freedom. And yet that's exactly what happens when someone dies, is they get total freedom, right? So the action card is gratitude. And I think that's, for me, one of the things about having these shared death experiences. It's really, I spend so much time in gratitude, whether I'm sitting with a hospice patient or when I was with my mom who was dying or my husband who was dying, and just really being grateful for my time with them and my experiences with them and my love for them, instead of focusing on, the death part and like the end of that. So I feel like, Spirit's guiding us to be much more, have much more gratitude about the time that we do have with people. And then the outcome card is leadership. And I feel like that's part of what, your role here is. I mean, the fact that a big publishing company has picked up your book and that it's going to be really taken out to the masses, I think is just such a great win for the whole end of life conversation. And it's super exciting that that you're leading this force of information for people, because I think it's really helpful and helps people get out of their deep, dark grief. Like, because what I've found is by embracing these moments, I don't feel nearly as alone or apart from my loved ones as just feeling like, oh, they're gone, and, never having to do anything with them again. So.
Yeah, I want to thank you for bringing up the impact that these experiences have on people, particularly around grief. We always miss deeply our loved ones when they die. But there's something about this experience, the shared death experience, that creates a larger context that allows us to be with the loss in a different way. Most people in our research, report that they feel like they'll see their loved one again, that their loved one's in a good place, that everything's just how it needs to be. They'll say things like, I know that this whole design of the human life and death and what lies beyond is all a loving, kind design. So all this is part of the experience, and it's something that the experiencer can take real practical solace in. They really feel like yeah, I miss my loved one, but I don't have that protracted grief that has me asking all these questions about, where is he or she, or why did this happen? There's a context that holds our grief differently, in a more
Yes.
meaningful way. The loss takes on a deeper, more compassionate meaning. So.
Yes, I agree. To me, it completely shifted. Well, I didn't really have that much familiarity with grief before my husband died. I still had 3 living grandparents when he died, and I was 37, and they all lived into their hundreds. So it was kind of new, but I was so afraid of it. And I was conditioned to believe he was going to hell. And so the fact that I got to see him in one of those welcome parties, was just extraordinary for me. And it shifted my whole foundation of what my beliefs are. And now I just know that, hey, this is exciting. I'm looking forward to crossing over when it comes to my time. Meanwhile, I'm going to enjoy my life to the fullest now because I'm not afraid of death.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've got the message.
That's right. Well, that's cool. Well, how can people get a hold of you, William?
Well, we have a website, sharedcrossing.com, and, you can email me at william@sharedcrossing.com. And, we have a whole staff here. So we are really focused on writing a book, but if people have certain questions and things like that, we'll often be able to get back to you and, give us a little bit of time because, like I said, small staff and focused on writing. But we are interested, particularly if people have stories, shared death experience stories. We will, if you write them out for us, that helps us immensely. If you go to our website, there's actually on the contact page, you'll see what we call a Shared Crossing Testimonial Project guide. So we'll tell you how to fill out a report, give us an account, and then we'll definitely get back to you if you give us an account, because we're still collecting them, and I should say this, that we are going to be launching a database so that people can read more of these accounts, and also they can post their own accounts, so that we want this to be a source for the world. Like, we're going to have it in different languages. And so if people are, people should know that these accounts will be shared, anonymously. We change the names, do what people want us to do for that. And we don't put anything up. That site is not up yet, but it will be, within the year. So yeah, we'd love to hear people's accounts. Yeah.
Well,
and there's
fantastic.
a lot of information on our website too. People find a lot of, you'll see how we break down a whole series of end-of-life experiences. We've created the Shared Crossing project spectrum of end-of-life experiences. So people can see, well, like maybe they didn't have a shared death experience, but they'll see that, oh, wow, I had a post-death visitation, or a pre-death premonition, or post-death vision, or something like that. So there's a lot of information there.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm super excited. This, of course, is one of my just passions in life, is talking about shared death, as I've experienced it so many times. So I love to be able to promote it as often as possible.
Well, thank you for reaching out and being patient with my schedule. So I'm glad to be here, and I like I said, I'm glad you're doing the work you are for your audience, because we need more experienced voices speaking, really wisely about these experiences, because, like I said, they are real human experiences, and we need to have permission to have them.
Fantastic. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Death podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any financial or legal decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Exploring Death. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.